In the UK alone, more than 200,000 books are published every year. So you might find yourself like me and often asking the question, what should I read next? Hi, my name is Bose. I have an MA in Early Modern English History, and on this channel we talk about history you don't learn about in school. And this week I'm going to give you some great history book recommendations because I know how much of a struggle it can be trying to find the right book to read. So today I'm going to go over 3 history books I always recommend, giving you a quick summary of a book, a few facts from the book, and then why I think you should read it. I hope you enjoy. Now, I'm very much an early modernist at heart, and during my degree we didn't really look at the Victorians in any level of detail. Books often included phrases like, this pattern held until the Victorians, or this changed during the Victorian era, but the specifics were never really touched on. So this last year, I've made a real effort to learn more about the Victorians, and I started this by reading several popular history books to gain a more general understanding of the period before diving headfirst into the academic texts. Our first book is Lucy Worsley's Queen Victoria, Daughter, Wife, Widow. Worsley examines 24 days in Queen Victoria's life in an attempt to provide insight into her as a person and answer the question, who was Queen Victoria? Worsley splits Victoria's life into 3 main sections: daughter, wife, and widow. Splitting Victoria's life into these 3 sections in itself is very telling, as it nods to contemporary 19th century beliefs that women were defined by their relation to men as either a daughter, wife, or widow, and even the Queen was no exception to this. Worsley also explains how Victoria played into contemporary gender roles and when she skirted around them in order to get her way. Worsley's examination of Victoria and Albert's marriage is fascinating. She examines how Victoria allowed Albert to take tight control of both political and domestic affairs following the birth of their first child, Vicky, and she explores the effect this had both on politics during Albert's lifetime and the impact his death had on Victoria as a grieving wife and as a queen now expected to make her own mind up on decisions after 21 years of largely deferring to her husband's opinions. Ultimately, Worsley uses Victoria's diaries, along with a whole host of other sources, in order to piece together a new portrait of Victoria, in order to pull back the curtain a little, and reveal a little bit more of who Queen Victoria really was, as a person and a monarch. The first fact from the book I have for you is that Queen Victoria's mother, Victory, made Victoria sleep in the same bedroom as her until Victoria became queen. My second fact for you from the book is that Victoria was delivered by Charlotte Heidenreich von Siebold, who was a qualified female physician, which was very unusual for the time, and she had travelled from Germany for the birth. Even weirder though, is that 3 months later, Siebold would also deliver Prince Albert, who would become Victoria's future husband. Worsley's book does not fall into the trap of idealising or romanticising Victoria's reign, in a way that so many books about monarchs do. And I also find her perspective on Victoria's marriage with Albert fresh and something that's very different from the mainstream narrative about their relationship. Therefore, if you want to learn more about Queen Victoria, who she was, and her reign, I think that this book is a great place to start. Now we will move from one of English history's most prominent women to 5 women whose names are scarcely remembered. Mary Ann Polly Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly. These are the women who were murdered by the unidentified killer operating in Whitechapel in 1888. But this book is not about him. That nameless killer has taken up enough attention. His story has been retold and speculated and glorified more than enough. Instead, The Five, by Hallie Rubenhold, investigates the lives of these 5 women. Their names, their identity, and their stories are put to the forefront for a change, as Rubenhold examines their life from birth to death. And through her impressive reconstruction of their lives, Rubenhold has set the historical record straight. There's no historical evidence at all that Polly Nichols, Annie Chapman, or Catherine Eddowes were involved in prostitution. Rather, the idea that they were prostitutes was an assumption made by the police at the time. And this assumption was made because they were destitute women. Polly Nichols spent her early years in Dorsecourt, which is where Charles Dickens imagined his character Fagin living in Oliver Twist. In May 1869, Annie Chapman had her wedding photograph taken. Elizabeth Stride opened a coffee house in Poplar. Catherine Eddowes travelled the country as a chapbook seller, writing and performing ballads. Mary Ann Kelly came from Cardiff, although she supposedly claimed to be Irish. This book is an impressive work of social history in Victorian England. It looks at issues like poverty and homelessness and what it meant to be a woman. But it is also so much more than that. This book gives Mary Ann Polly Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly their stories back, and for that reason alone, I believe it is a must-read history book. In complete contrast is Annie Gray's book, The Bookshop, the Draper, and the Candlestick Maker, A History of the High Street. Gray takes us through the history of the High Street and shopping itself, from the medieval era to beyond the 1960s. The functions of markets are explored, and the introduction of physical shops for the first time, and eventually we get to shopping centres. Gray gives thorough examples of how English towns changed over the centuries, and how shopping drove this change, as it became a desirable leisure activity and something aspirational, rather than just a necessity. Some facts from the book include that it has been vaguely estimated that by 1688 there were more than 50,000 shopkeepers in England, which rose to 142,000 by 1750. In 18th century Bath, you could visit Elizabeth Taylor's coffee house, which was also a jeweller's and a toy shop. And it was only open to women, which was most unusual for any type of coffee house at the time. In London in the 19th century, captured cannons from the Napoleonic Wars were used as street bollards. Gray has a really friendly and entertaining writing style, and her book provides a great introduction into how England used to look, how the towns and cities used to function. If you've ever imagined what it is like to walk down a street in 18th century London, then this is the book for you. Today I have recommended 3 very different history books in an attempt to help you find your next great read. I also wanted to show you the broadness of the different history books on the market right now. If you do read any of these books, or have read them already, please let me know in the comments below what you thought. That's all for now. Bye!